Hey guys, Skellington80 here. So today we've got day 3 of our Bean Stalker series, and the chapter we're reading together is called The Princess and the Pea. It'll make sense later, trust me. So without further ado, let's begin. Once upon the same time, in the other castle we saw at the beginning of the book, the one at the tower, a king and a queen had a rather musical problem. They sat on matching thrones, they were wrapped in silk and fur and dripping with jewels, and even though no one was there to see them, they acted very royal. Their spines were as straight as rulers, because as rulers their spines could not possibly be any other way. How are we ever going to marry off our son? There aren't any good princesses anymore, the king said with a scowl. Back in my day, the queen said, holding a perfumed handkerchief beneath her nose, because even the air she breathed wasn't fancy enough for her. Princesses were serious, proper things. Nowadays, they're all insane. You can't get through a single conversation with one before they break into a song. The queen nodded. Just the other day, I was trying to talk to a princess, and she started singing mid-sentence. She kept pausing like I was supposed to join in. How would I even know what to sing back? How does she even know the words? I had her thrown in the dungeon. As well you should have, my queen. I refuse to run a kingdom where everyone has to constantly be ready to break into a musical number. Think of the cost, all the lost hours of work. The shoes worn out by elaborate dance routines, not to mention the voice lessons we'd have to buy. No singing princesses for us. I want a good old-fashioned, run-of-the-mill, needlework-loving princess. I want her to be stuffy and uptight. No enormous, sparkling eyes and exuberance for life. She should be frequently ill, look as though she had a bad taste in her mouth at all times, and be extremely delicate to the point of ridiculousness. The king sighed, patting his large velvet-clad belly. Where will we find such a creature? We should have a test, perhaps some sort of obstacle course, in whichever princess throws the most proper tantrum over being asked to perform physical labor wins. The queen sighed, rubbing the deep, dark circles beneath her eyes. I can't think of anything else. I'm too tired. There was a cricket outside last night, so I couldn't sleep. I didn't hear a cricket. Neither did I, but I was sure that somewhere out there was a cricket making noise, and it bothered me so much that I didn't get any rest. You know how difficult it is for me to sleep. It was true. She needed a mattress made from precisely 10,000 feathers from newborn geese. If the geese were teenagers, or there were 9,999 feathers, she could not sleep. The room had to be the exact temperature of a jellied eel dish. However, not one of the servants could decide at what temperature jellied eels could possibly taste good, so they had to constantly bring in ice and remove it, stoke the fire and smother it, and finally employ several handmaidens to sit at her bedside and gently blow on her face all night long. The handmaidens, of course, were permitted to eat nothing but honey, so their breath wasn't offensive. For some reason, the handmaidens kept quitting. My queen, I know what we should do. A true princess, as one as royal as you, will be an equally sensitive sleeper. We shall invite them, one by one, to spend the night in our castle. Beneath their mattress we will place a single pea. The queen gasped in horror. Why, I won't be able to sleep for a week just imagining the discomfort. Precisely. So if the princess comes out in the morning, refreshed and alert, we'll know she's not a true enough princess for us. The queen nodded, pinched eyes shining beneath her enormous crown. And if she's exhausted and has not slept, we'll immediately marry her to our son. The king suddenly looked nervous. He darted his eyes around the imposing throne room with its soaring ceilings and gold-trimmed pillars. Everything in there felt like it was fancy and breakable. It was like a museum. It had not been a very fun place for the prince to grow up, and even worse, every time he tried to sing a song about it, he was sent back to his tower. He had stopped singing, but ever since the unfortunate escaped, they never let him out at all. Where is our son? The king asked, sweat beading on his wrinkled forehead. The queen jangled a large ring of keys fastened to the gold belt around her waist. Don't worry, we're safe. There's no reason to consult him. We'll surprise him when we found him the perfect wife. In fact, the poor prince does not appear in the story at all. Which, given that it is entirely about him... let me start over. In fact, the poor prince does not appear in this story at all, which, given that it is entirely about finding him a wife, is rather mysterious, isn't it? Why do they keep him in that tower? The king sighed with relief, snatching the queen's nose handkerchief to wipe his brow. She pulled another out of her dress, glaring at him. Now that one will need to be burned. They both cringed at the word burned, then cleared their throats and stared royally at nothing. It was their greatest skill as rulers. Oh, hang on. I accidentally flipped 2 pages. The first princess arrived on a Tuesday. Tuesdays are the most disagreeable day of the week. Fridays are always welcome. They're like your friend who has the best jokes and shares treats at lunch. Thursdays try to overcompensate to get you to like them more than Fridays. Their jokes are never as good as Fridays, but at least they try. Saturdays and Sundays are like your favorite cousins who come to stay, and there's a sleepover and everything is super fun. Mondays are like your mom after your cousins leave. She's tired and cranky because the whole house is a mess, but at least you had a good time. And Wednesdays squat in the middle, balancing everything, ready to tip from the dull beginning of the week into the inevitable slide into the weekend. But Tuesdays are the bullies of the week. Last weekend is a distant memory, next weekend is still too far away to look forward to, and if everyone is still tired for Monday, Tuesday doesn't care. Tuesday will kick you right in the stomach and laugh all the way up until next week when it does it again. The queen, being very disagreeable herself, felt a special kinship with Tuesdays. She thought it was appropriate that the princess chose that day to arrive and took it as a very good sign. The princess was small, with a pointed nose and squinty eyes. She resembled a rat who had been dressed in brown silk and weighed down with gold. But at least she was like a normal rat and not an albino one, so her eyes weren't red. This isn't as scary as Snow White's story, and for that I'm glad. While the princess was eating supper and complaining about every course, a fact that filled the king and queen with hope, the king took their new servant boy, Jack, aside. "You've prepared the room?" "Yep. And the pea? You didn't forget the pea, right?" Jack nodded, with a pained look on his face. "I took care of that. But I still don't understand why you wanted me to do it." The king sniffed haughtily. "Of course you wouldn't understand. Which is why you are a servant and I am the king. Now go and make the peas porridge for the rest of the servants to eat. You can eat the scraps from the princess's plate." "What kind of porridge?" Jack asked. "Peas porridge. It's the very least we can do for our servants. No, really, it's the very least we can do to keep them alive." Jack shrugged and did as he was told. This whole job thing was weird. He didn't much like it, but it was better than being shoved in a well. Oh, right. That references the poem at the beginning of the chapter. I am so sorry, I forgot that. I'll read it afterwards. After dinner, the king and queen sat in the library with the princess. She complained about the journey from her kingdom. She complained about the height and width of the stairs of the castle, which she felt were several centimeters from what would be the ideal height and width for stairs. She was very passionate about stairs, it turned out. She complained about the colors of the flames in the fireplace, which she thought should be more yellow than orange. She disliked the color orange in general, which she found offensive and thought should be banned. And she complained about the prince, whom they had not invited to come down. The king and queen were very encouraged. They complained about the prince constantly, and they had known him from when he was born. So for her to complain about him before even meeting him was an indication that she was very intelligent. She seemed just about perfect. When they sent the princess off to bed, they were giddy with excitement. All they had to do was pass the pea test, or all she had to do, and they would have a wife for their son. The king and queen were dressed and sitting on their thrones bright and early the next morning, waiting to give the princess the good news. "I couldn't sleep all night, imagining a pea beneath my mattress," the queen said. "I am so tired and grouchy. I will probably sentence a peasant to life in prison for no reason at all today." The king smiled proudly. "And soon we will have a daughter-in-law every bit as wonderful as you." The princess stormed into the throne room, hair askew, squinty face screwed up into a ratty expression of fury. A furious rat is something no one ever wants to behold, much less first thing in the morning. Even calm rats are perfectly avoided, unless they are your pets. Or preferably avoided, sorry. But you wouldn't want one for a daughter-in-law. However, in this case, the king and queen were delighted. "How did you sleep?" the king said, giggling as he had not done since he was a little boy, and had his tutor whipped for telling him 4 times 2 wasn't 10. "Yes, how did you sleep?" the queen asked, smiling in a way that she thought was benevolent, but would have made a small child, or even a small adult, cry. I thought your stairs were bad, but they were nothing compared to that room. I have never been so horrendously treated in my life. If I never set foot in this castle again, it will be too soon. The king and queen turned to each other, clasping hands. We did it, they exclaimed. We got a princess with high standards and no musical ability whatsoever. They turned back to inform the princess that she had passed their test and was to marry their son, only to find that she had already left the throne room. They cringed as she slammed every door on her way out. It was a very large castle with 41 doors between the princess and the outer gate. It took a very long time. Well, the king said, frowning, perhaps she was too sensitive. The queen sat on her throne with a huff. The princess was obviously more sensitive than she was, which made the queen very angry. But the queen couldn't very well storm out of her own castle and slam all her own doors. It was very unfair. She comforted herself with the thought that at least slamming doors was an unqueenly thing to do. She could injure one of her precious royal hands, so she would have a servant do it for her. She rang the bell for a servant, but it took several minutes before one finally appeared. He was out of breath, with his cap nearly falling off. Sorry, hair on the page. It was Jack again. Why did it take you so long? Why wasn't someone here sooner? Jack shrugged. A few servants didn't come in today. We're all doing double duty. The head maid is mucking the stables, the butler's weeding the garden, and the cook is cleaning toilets. The cook is cleaning toilets? The king asked, horrified. We'll have her hands removed before she goes back to cooking for us. You mean have her hands washed? No, I mean have her hands removed. I won't have hands that touch the toilets touch my food. But if she doesn't have hands, how can she? Enough! The king roared. Send for the next princess. The queen waved her perfumed handkerchief. And as soon as you're done with that, slam every door in the kitchen. No, castle. Dang it. I'm very bad at reading things out loud, but I'm doing it anyways. The first princess had arrived on a Tuesday, but the second acted like a Tuesday. She walked in with an escorting guard on either side of her royal person and looked the queen up and down. Oh, she said, what an interesting crown. Even though she was smiling, the way she said interesting felt like being pinched. The king's hand darted to his crown, fondling the golden prongs. It's an heirloom. Oh, so she said, so it's sentimental. That explains why you'd wear something that ugly. She smiled again, like what she said was something nice. Her face was so blank it was like a mirror. So the king and queen smiled back to reflect her. They were pretty sure she was insulting them, but she said it so sweetly and with such a bland smile it was confusing. They ate supper with her. Is that a painting of the prince? She asked, looking at one of the royal portraits glowering in a long line along the wall. The most recent was, in fact, a painting of the prince. It had been painted through bars and at a distance, but the painter had mostly got his face right. Though the artist had, at the queen's request, made the prince look haughty and dour instead of clueless and pleasant. And the artist had given him eyebrows again, big bushy ones like two mutant caterpillars. I prefer him without eyebrows. The queen smiled fondly at the grimacing portrait. Yes, that's him. Oh, the princess said, he has your nose. She slid that smile onto the end of the sentence again, but the queen felt the words pinching her. The queen put her hand over her nose. She had always thought she had a wonderful nose, large and noble like an eagle. But now she wondered if eagles were not the standard of beauty for women. She excused herself early, and summoned Jack the servant again. Is her room prepared, the pea in place? She paced out of sorts, and wishing she could somehow cover up her nose. Yes, Jack said. I still don't understand why you would want me to do that to the bed, though. Don't question me, the queen snapped. Later, she sat in front of a mirror, looking at her nose from every possible angle and being upset at each of them. I think she's an amazing princess, the queen said to the king, who was trying to make his tummy look smaller. The princess had... What? Yes, I'm recording a video right now. It's okay. Yes, I'll do that. Okay. Sorry about that interruption. She couldn't And don't get mad at her. She couldn't have possibly known. Okay. The princess had asked in an innocent tone whether large stomachs were fashionable in this kingdom, because they certainly weren't in hers. You do? The king asked. A queen should make everyone else feel inferior, and she's certainly skilled at that. She is, the king agreed. Even though the second princess had such a marvelous queenly quality to her, the king and queen were both nervous the next morning. Would her skills at finding fault extend to the pea in the mattress? In place of the princess, though, they were met by Jack. He carried a letter. It was neatly rolled and tied with an elegant bow. Dear king and queen, while I'm certain your son is as lovely as your castle, I'm afraid neither is to my taste. Thank you so much for your overwhelming hospitality. All the best, Princess Tuesday. Is it just me, she said to the king, or do some of these words feel like she's pinching us? The queen rubbed her rear end. I'm not sure why she did that, but okay. It isn't just you. I don't understand. Why did she leave? She must have felt the pea, but why couldn't she have stayed until she found out the good news? We've lost another one. The king drooped sorrowfully. The queen wouldn't admit it, but she was relieved. If the first princess was more sensitive than she was, then the second was certainly more critical than she was, and the queen did not like the idea of a daughter-in-law who was better than her. The Jack, still standing there because he hadn't been dismissed, shifted awkwardly from foot to foot. Maybe it's the bed? It doesn't seem very pleasant. Oh, what would you know? The queen growled. She looked Jack up and down, trying to find some way to make him feel bad about himself. Isn't your face interesting? Jack brightened, smiling and standing straighter. Thank you. My stepmother always told me so, too. She said an interesting face is better than a handsome one, because handsome faces don't always mean handsome hearts, but interesting faces always mean interesting hearts. The queen slumped in her throne, even her ruler spine wilting with disappointment. Jack obviously did not feel one bit bad about himself. Oh, go eat the princess's breakfast, since she isn't here, and then make the peas porridge for the other servants. Can't I make them something else? Jack asked. Go now, or I'll have you thrown in the dungeon. There aren't even enough servants left to eat it. We still have leftovers from the last batch. Then take the leftovers to the village and let the peasants eat it. They'll be grateful. I don't think they will, Jack muttered. But he did as he told. He'd leave a batch for that rotten Jill. At least, it was the least he could do. Again, that pertains to the poem at the beginning of the chapter, which I am very sorry I didn't read. I promise I'll do it at the end. The third princess was their last hope. The princess from the next castle over was missing. Poor, beautiful Snow White. Every other princess in the area had rosy cheeks and massive eyes. They even looked like singers. It was the third princess or nobody. She arrived in the throne room without the customary 2 guards. She was even smaller than the first princess, but decidedly less Tuesday-ish than the second one. The third princess looked like nothing so much as a detention, a timeout, or a grounding of epic proportions. Where are my soldiers? The king asked, standing in a rage. They aren't doing their duty. I had them thrown in the dungeon, the princess said. You what? I didn't like the way the first one smelled, and the second one almost smiled when my foot caught under a tile. He was definitely thinking about smiling, so I had him thrown in the dungeon. But that's my job, the queen said. The princess narrowed her eyes. It's very improper to speak to a princess when you haven't been formally introduced. The king and queen, thoroughly embarrassed, introduced themselves. Supper was late. The cook, no longer having any hands, had a hard time managing the meals. The princess had her thrown into dang it, sorry. Blah, can't talk today. The princess had her thrown into the dungeon along with the 2 servers. But you can't have them locked up, the king protested. The soup was cold, and the jelly eel tasted too much of jelly and eel. Yes, the queen agreed, but what he means is this is our castle. You can't go throwing our servants into the dungeon. The princess narrowed her eyes. I don't like being disagreed with. I'm certain there's more room in the dungeon. Guards, the queen screeched. Someone, anyone, escort the princess to her room. Jack hurried into the dining hall. Don't we have any other servants? The king asked, frowning. Almost all of them are sick, or in the dungeon. Jack looked warily at the princess. Is her room ready? Did you specially prepare it? The queen was terrified that this princess would notice the pea, but she was more terrified to tell her to go home. Not only because she was their last chance, but also because she didn't want the princess to get angry with her. And after the more sensitive first princess, the second princess making everyone feel bad about themselves, and now this princess being better at throwing people in the dungeon, the queen was starting to wonder if she had any special talents at all. I think the queen is a little off her princessy priorities, but I hate being thrown in dungeons, so I'm not going to tell her that. Jack, who also hated being thrown in dungeons, nodded uneasily. I did what you asked. Good. Take her to her room. I hope you sleep well. The king looked at the queen, and she shrugged. She didn't know what she wanted either. They didn't have to wait until the morning, though. No sooner had Jack escorted the princess to her room, she came roaring into the throne room. What is the meaning of this? I have never been so insulted in all my life. The queen tried to force a smile. Was the mattress uncomfortable, dear? Uncomfortable? It was disgusting! The king's mouth trembled as he, too, tried to force a smile. Good news! That means you are worthy of marrying our... Into the dungeon! Both of you! The princess screamed, pointing at them. Everyone just stood there. Jack said, they're the king and queen. You can't throw them into the dungeon. I can and I will. I'll throw all of you in the dungeon for this. But don't you want to marry our son? The queen asked, wringing her hands in despair. She didn't want to go to the dungeon. She didn't have any good dungeon outfits, and it certainly wouldn't smell nice. Plus, she wasn't the most popular person down there. After what you've done to me, you're lucky I don't have you all executed. Now, where are the guards? You had them thrown in the dungeon, the king said, waving his hands in exasperation. The princess narrowed her eyes, and everyone froze, bowing their heads meekly. Someday the princess would make an excellent mother, school principal, or dictator. Maybe all three. Very well, I'm having your entire kingdom thrown in the dungeon. Jack couldn't figure out how that would work. Are you actually throwing people into the dungeon? Who do you have to do it? They'd have to be pretty strong to toss around so many people, and no one could lift a whole kingdom. Do you mean everyone in the kingdom or the kingdom itself? Because there's no way the actual kingdom with all the buildings and animals and dirt would fit into the kingdom. Dungeon. Sorry. I don't mean I'll put the kingdom in the actual dungeon, you idiot. I mean a metaphorical dungeon. Jack scratched his head. I don't think you can make bars out of metaphors. Arrgh! The princess screamed, stomping one tiny, terrible foot. I will go to every kingdom in the land and tell them all what you have done. No one will ever visit here again. And no one will ever be allowed to leave. You are all grounded forever. With that, she turned and thundered from the castle. All over one little pea. The king took off his crown and rubbed his bald head. I thought we were sensitive, but apparently princesses these days are even harder to please. You did put just one pea under the mattress, right? The queen asked. Jack scrunched up his face in confusion. I don't know what that you could say just one. You can't really measure it that way. What do you mean? Of course you could measure a single pea. I guess, but it all depends on how much I had to drink that afternoon. Oh boy. The king frowned and asked, what do you mean? Okay, no, I messed up, dang it. What does you drinking have to do with putting a pea under the mattress? Well, I can't very well do it if I don't have to go to the bathroom. The queen's eyes widened as the full, horrible truth descended on her in a flush. I mean, a rush. No, I mean a flush. Jack, she said, spell pea. Well, that's easy. There's only one way. P-E-E. I told you, spelling matters. The queen pointed a trembling finger at the door. You've ruined everything, you disgusting, vile creature. Go to the dungeon. But I did what you told me, and the dungeon is full. Get out, the queen screamed. Just get out. Jack, confused and disappointed at once again being kicked out of a castle, ran out as fast as he could. But who will make peas porridge now? The king asked. Jack has been cooking it for all the servants. Oh no, the queen whispered. Peas porridge. He didn't. Oh no. Alright, and as promised, the poem I was supposed to read at the beginning of the chapter. Alright, meanwhile, Jack and Jill went up the hill to fetch a pail of water. She pushed him in, and with a grin, went on to further slaughter. Jill skipped home, and then alone she traveled through the wood, and on her head in crimson red she wore a velvet hood. Alright, so apparently, yes, they do have some connection to the main story, because the story mentioned Jack being shoved into a well, and referenced Jill, so I guess I was wrong. And also, that one didn't have many horror elements in it like the previous two, but I don't know. I guess it was good for those of you who like Twilight humor, so I don't know what else to say. Like, comment, subscribe, and all that jazz. Happy Halloween, and we'll see you tomorrow. Bye!